Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update. Join the only official Telegram channel of RAU'S IAS Study Circle to get relevant material and important updates.
Hello everyone and welcome to Daily News Simplified, your one-stop solution to detailed analysis of current affairs which are published in the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. Articles dated 17th of June 2022 are listed on your screen, and the timestamping for these articles is already mentioned in the description box. So let us begin with the first article for the day. These two articles were published on page number 8 and page number 14. The two articles actually talks about the recently published report by the National Statistical Organization named as Periodic Labour Force Survey. Now, as far as detail on this survey is concerned, that what this survey is all about and how this survey is actually enumerated was discussed recently, that is a day before, on 15th of June 2022. So here we have already discussed the important key terms with respect to this survey. We have already discussed the basic aspect of periodic labor force survey conducted in India, as well as we have gone through the important highlights of this survey report. So today we'll talk about the important terms with respect to employment and unemployment. So let's start understanding important key terms and their definition with respect to employment and unemployment in India. So we'll start from the cyclical unemployment first. Cyclical unemployment occurs in an economy when there is a situation of trade cycles. Trade cycle simply means the situation where the economy goes through ups and downs in its GDP growth rate. We have situations like boom. On the other hand, we have the extreme situations like depression. Similarly, we have recovery and recession. So whenever there is an unemployment situation in a country because of the boom, depression, recession or recovery, the unemployment in the economy would be called as cyclical unemployment. Now, as recovery, boom, recession and depression becomes part of a cycle and moves in a wave-like structure, this is known as the cyclical unemployment. Then comes the seasonal unemployment. From the name itself, it is clear that seasonal unemployment would be called by the change in the season of an economy. Now, you must have seen that some people are working as a vendors and selling a particular product or a particular good in the market in a particular season. So you might have a season for ice creams, you might have a season for peanuts, you have seasons for specific festivals also. So let's say you want to buy a kite to fly in a kite festival. Now, kite manufacturing or kite flying is not a year-round employment. So, field like agriculture, holiday resort, factories, people who are working in these sectors are based on the seasonal employment. And if they are unemployed, they will be called as seasonally unemployed. The third one is the disguised. Disguised means in a different form altogether. It is a situation when a person is doing less than what they are required to do, or when the number of people are more than what is required in a particular work. So let's say there is an agriculture field which requires 10 to 15 people to work, and these 10 to 15 people would be enough to cultivate a particular crop. Now assume that instead of 10 to 15 people, there are 20 to 25 people who are working on that field. Now, this is the wastage not only on the money or wages paid to these labor, but this is also a wastage of excess manpower which could have been employed somewhere else. And when we have more people employed in a particular work than actually required, the extra people, in this case, 5 to 10 people are actually under the disguised unemployment. Then comes the structural unemployment. It arises due to the drastic changes in the economic structure, maybe shifting from agriculture economy to the industrial, or from the industrial to the service, or India's syncretic case where Indian economy has shifted directly from the agriculture to the service sector. Now these change may affect either the supply of the factor or even the demand of the factor. Now a person who was working on the field may not be equally relevant or may not be equally skilled to provide his service in the service sector. Then we have the issue of underemployment. So most of the employment in India is in the form of underemployment. When people are contributing less than their capacity to produce. It simply means that people who are working in a particular area are not providing what is expected from them to provide. Let's say a single person is required to, let's say, produce 10 pieces of a single product. But this person is producing only 6 or maybe 7 pieces of the same product. Now, this is known as underemployment. Now, students should not be confused between the disguised unemployment and the underemployment. In underemployment, per capita or per person, productivity is less vis-a-vis the others. On the other hand, in disguised, that person is completely useless in a particular production activity. Then we come to the chronic unemployment. It is a simple situation in which a person cannot find employment even in the long term. And people are not even finding the basic employment in order to feed themselves or their family. This is known as chronic or the extreme form of unemployment. Then we come to the casual employment. Casual employment simply means a person is working on a casual basis, that is day-to-day basis. He or she may work today, may not work today, may work on a short-term contract, or may remain unemployed for the shortage of material or anything else like that. Then we have the open unemployment. It is a situation when a large section of a labor force does not get a job that may yield them a regular income or livelihood. And lastly, we have the frictional unemployment, which is caused due to the improper adjustment between the supply of labor and demand of labor. It is because of the transitional phase. Let's say a person was employed in company A and then he was trying to shift to a company B. But in the transition, he was busy in acquiring a particular skill. Now, let's say he has acquired X skill, let's say a computer proficiency, language proficiency, mathematical proficiency, or whatever. The period in which, or the transition period in which this person was acquiring a particular skill, and in that period, this person will remain unemployed. That is the reason why, after getting a particular skill, he will leave company A and apply to company B. This basic transition phase of unemployment is because of the frictional unemployment. This may be due to the supply of labor, this may be due to the demand of labor. Then we come to the important measurements of unemployment. So whenever you go through the important data based on the unemployment in the country, you will find these three important status. The first one being the weekly status unemployment. Second one is the usual status unemployment, and third one is the current daily status or CDS. It simply means that in a particular period of time, whether a person is employed or not. If a person is employed on daily basis, that employment will be calculated under CDS. If a person is employed on the yearly basis, it will be captured under the usual status. And if a person is employed or unemployed under the weekly basis, that person will be categorized under WS. So, let us go through their specific understanding. We'll start from the current daily status first. If a person works each day or the preceding 7 days, usually in India, it is taken as a working hour. If a person has worked for 4 hours or more during a day, this person is employed. If not, he is unemployed. Here, the basic measurement unit is per day. This shows the extreme form of unemployment because even at a daily basis, a person may be unemployed. It might be a case that a person goes to a particular job, falls ill, take a leave for a week or maybe for 2 or 3 weeks. So if we just calculate that person on an average, that person might be unemployed for a while in a short period. That is the reason why government has shifted more towards the weekly status. Now, weekly status shows that a person has employed or was unemployed in last 1 week. If a person is unemployed, he is not able to work even for 1 hour during the last 1 week or the survey period. But if that person has worked only just 1 day in the past week, that person will be called as employed. Maybe he or she is working on a weekly basis. Then comes the last form, which is based on the yearly calculations. This also forms the part of open unemployment or the chronic unemployment that we have discussed previously. It measures that a person is unemployed for major part of an year. So here the basic calculating unit is year. It will give you the lowest estimate of unemployment. Why? Because let's say there are 365 days and a person has worked for, let's say, 2 days. So this person is employed, not unemployed. So this person is employed on the basis of this category. So that is the reason why almost every person, maybe 1 day or 2 day, maybe a week or a month, will find one form or the other form of employment. That is the reason why the estimates under US is the least one. The people who are measured or surveyed under this category are falling under two important subtypes, which is principal activity and the subsidiary activity. This simply means the principal sector or the primary sector and the secondary sector. Now, what we have learned so far: if a person is unable to find an employment for 4 hours in a day, he is unemployed. If a person is not able to find a single day of employment in 7 days of a week, he is unemployed. And if a person is unable to find employment for the entire year, he is also unemployed under the third category. So, based on this classification and the discussion that we have conducted on DNS on 15th of June, you will be able to get the entire picture of how estimates are made with respect to the employment in India. Now, we should also go through some of the causes of unemployment in India. These are as follows. The first one is rapid growth of population vis-a-vis the jobs. So it has increased the labor force, but the opportunities have not been increased. Then comes the underdevelopment of the Indian economy. Still, the large part of the section is working on the agriculture field. And in this agriculture field, we are going through the slow growth rate, which is ranging between 2 to 4% annually. Then we have the defective system of education, which is focusing more on the rote learning rather than the capacity building and the skill development. Then we have the issue of absence of manpower planning in the country. We have degeneration of the village industries. So khadi and village industries are no longer more attractive in generating the employment. We have inappropriate technology. So on the one side, the technology is taking away the important jobs in the sector. On the other side, the sectors which require technology is inappropriate. Then we have the slow growth of the industrial sector, because industrial sector provides sustainable and long-term employment growth. Then we have the issue of immobility of labor. So people are not working or not migrating from right place to the other right place. So they are just shifting to the nearby urban areas, maybe one urban area to the other. They are lacking the skills. If not, the policies are not favoring. If policies are favoring, the transportation is not favoring their daily commute. And lastly, we have the jobless growth. Apart from these economic reasons, there are other reasons as well. The first one being the international supply and demand shock. Whenever there is a high demand of employment, people migrate from India to the outer world and they leave the space for the domestic worker. Then we have unstable policy framework. So whenever we see there is a change in the polity, whenever there is a change in the government in a particular state or even at the center, we find that there is a shift in the policy. The recent case being the policy with respect to the labor laws. Then we have social tensions among the people. So son of the soil approach is there. So people do not find good employment in the nearby areas or in the other states. Then we have issues related to the lockdown, especially with respect to the COVID-19, where the unemployment just shoot up to 20% in the overall situation. Then we have political bunds and the security issues. So political bunds are mostly organized by the political party, which causes the unemployment on the current status. Then we have the security issues, where I would like to give you the example of J&K. A consistent lockdown in the markets of Kashmir led to the prolonged unemployment to their people. So in case you get any kind of question from your general studies paper 3 with respect to the employment in the mains examination, you can target these 16 points one after the other in order to substantiate your points. Now we'll look into the regional difference. So this data which we are showing on the screen is given by the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. As per the data provided in May 2022, that is just last month, the highest unemployment was seen or was observed in the state of Haryana, followed by states such as Rajasthan or states such as Tripura. The surprising fact that we can learn from this table is the states where the education rate is very high or state where literacy rate is very high such as Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh are showing the low level of unemployment rate. So this simply means that people who are literate more will find better opportunities for the employment rather than people who are not educated or not literate enough. And lastly, we'll go through this important table. So this graph actually shows the level of unemployment in the past 5 years. So UPSC in the prelim examination has a habit of asking such kind of trends with respect to different variables in the economy in the past 5 years or 10 years. The overall growth rate in the urban areas, as you can see, so the purple color is urban area, the green color is your rural area, and the blue color shows the India's overall growth. So from this graph, what we have learned that in the past 5 years, the overall unemployment rate of India has remained more or less close to the average of 7.5%. But in the case of March 2020, when there was a national lockdown, you can see the unemployment rate shoot to up to 25% overall in the country. So what we have learned? We have learned that because of certain reasons, there might be a short-term increase in the unemployment, but overall India's unemployment rate remains between 6 to 7.5% based on different parameters. With this discussion placed, now I will leave you with this question to practice. So read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article appeared on page 3rd of Delhi edition Hindu newspaper and talks about an important freedom fighter, social reformer as well as political leader India has ever seen. And the article talks about Bhim Rao Ambedkar and his contribution towards various aspects of life. Now, from the prelims perspective as well as from the mains perspective, Bhim Rao Ambedkar is extremely important. In the prelim examination, UPSC has already asked questions with respect to his important institutions. In the mains examination, his ideological views are also important. So from both these perspectives, we are going to identify and talk about his important contribution to India's freedom struggle, political development as well as social reforms. He was a chairman to the drafting committee to the Constituent Assembly. Do not get confused with the Parliamentary Assembly or with the Central Assembly. And he was a very good scholar who studied history and economics to a wider extent. He was a learned jurist, idealist as well as the emancipator for social reforms. He was born and belonged to the Mahar community, which is also considered as a Dalit community in central India. After achieving good grades in his basic education, he also attained a PhD in economics from London School of Economics in London. As far as socio-political agenda is concerned, well, after going through the personal atrocities belonging to a Mahar community, he decided to fight against the social norms of casteism. He was against the caste-based discrimination and untouchability. Ambedkar was in favor of removing or annihilating or completely eradicating the caste system. He condemned the Hindu scriptures and considered that these scriptures actually propagated the caste discrimination or the inequality among the caste of Hindu religion. He was also part of the Bombay Presidency Committee that was working with the Simon Commission in 1928. Although he was not a member of Simon Commission, he established Bahiskrit Hitkarni Sabha to promote education as well as the socio-economic improvement among the Dalits. He also wrote some of the publications such as Mook Nayak as well as the Bahishkrit Bharat. He advocated the separate electorate for the depressed classes. That is one of the demands in the Round Table Conference, which later came across as a bitterness between Gandhi and Ambedkar and ultimately led to the signing of Pune Pact in 1932, in which instead of providing separate electorate, reserved seats were provided for the depressed classes. Ambedkar also organized the Meher Satyagraha. Meher stands for the Meher community,
in 1927. In 1930, he launched the Kala Ram temple movement. However, they were not able to propagate this agenda to the fuller extent. This temple movement was in the demand to provide entry to the depressed classes in the higher temples of Hindu gods and goddesses. He also founded the Independent Labour Party, which also remains his core labour party for fighting the political elections. This later transformed into Scheduled Caste Federation in 1936. This was once asked by the UPSC also. He also considered the right to constitutional remedy, that is Article 32 of the Indian Constitution, as the core or the soul of Indian Constitution. He was very vigorous and very catalytic as far as Hindu Code Bill and its introduction as well as passage in the Indian Parliament is concerned. This core bill was targeting to bring the equality among male and female in Hindu religion. And lastly, in 1956, he converted himself to the other religion, that is Buddhism, and also started following and spreading the Buddhist ideas. He also started one of the separate school of Buddhism, and this was called by the name Navyan, that is new vehicle, which tried to bring more reforms into the earlier schools of thought under Buddhism, that is Mahayana and Hinayana. From the economic perspective, he advocated the free economy, that is laissez-faire. He also tried and advocated to bring more socialist-based capitalism in the countries like India, and also demanded the stable rupee vis-a-vis the pound and sterling. He was totally a proponent of birth control based on the demand scarcity argument. He considered high population to be a bane for the developing countries like India, because higher population with lower skills and education creates more demand without income generation, and this creates the demand scarcity problem in developing countries like India. He was also awarded the Bharat Ratna in 1990. As far as his research work is concerned, well, this could possibly be asked by the UPSC also. This includes the thesis which he submitted during his programs in economics PhD. This included the ancient Indian commerce, national dividend of India, as well as the problem of rupee. He also wrote a paper on the caste in India and their mechanism. He also published a paper with the title Who Were Shudras? All these papers either focused on the economic development of India or the socio-cultural development. As far as his value system is concerned, well, this is important for your general studies paper 4. He was a democratic person who believed in peaceful resolution of the problem in non-violent and harmonious means. He also called for the spirit of fraternity, compassion towards the downtrodden, and the equality among the genders and different castes. These are the following important books written by Ambedkar, and the most important one being The Annihilation of Caste, which he wrote in 1936.
This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page 15 and talks about World Trade Organization's recent move to extend the e-commerce tariff freeze in provisional deal. Now, before venturing into the article, please understand what this is all about. If a person is, let's say, importing a product A from US to India, that person will be paying a specific duty and there will be a higher price of A. But if that person is importing not A but any service, let's say a software on e-commerce, now as software from the e-commerce is not physically crossing India's boundary, so there will be no duty or no tax will be imposed. So there will be no price change. Now, developed nations such as US and European countries want that the second situation should always prevail. There must not be any tax, any duty imposed on the e-commerce transactions globally. No tariff should be imposed on that. But developing countries like India wants to impose such kind of duty on the e-commerce transactions coming from outside India. Now, World Trade Organization since late 1990s was in favor to keep the tariff out of the perspective. And every ministerial meeting that occurs every 2 years, WTO has tried to extend the e-commerce tariff freeze from the products and from different transactions. It simply means that as of now and for next 2 years, no tariff or duty will be imposed on the e-commerce. Simply means World Trade Organization has yet again favored the developed nations, and it has gone against the wishes of India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Pakistan and South Africa, who have now threatened to block the extension in the 5-day ministerial conference. So, now we will go through the important elements of this article and try to venture deeper into the extent of this issue. We have already discussed this topic, so if you have seen this topic previously, you can skip it or you can take it as a revision. Now, the 12th ministerial meeting of World Trade Organization, which held last year, was postponed indefinitely. Reason being simple, that there was no consensus which was created between developing and the developed nation on the point of e-commerce custom duties. These nations, the member nations, were supposed to discuss the extension of the moratorium on custom duties for further years. However, developed nations have provided arguments to completely remove this postponement and clearly defined that no custom duty should be imposed on e-commerce going from one nation to the other nation. Thereby, they have left the uncertainty with respect to the custom duty on global e-commerce transactions. Now, according to the World Trade Organization, e-commerce is defined as production, distribution, marketing, sale, or delivery of goods and services such as films, music, video games, softwares, and others by electronic means. So, definition is simple and straightforward. In 1998, World Trade Organization members came across and gave the Declaration on Global Electronic Commerce, and under this, they decided not to impose, please keep this in your mind, they decided in 1998 that no custom duties will be imposed on the e-commerce transaction. And this moratorium to not include custom duty will be renewed every 2 years. Now, whenever the ministerial conference meet, ministerial conference is the higher decision making body of World Trade Organization. So whenever they meet, they extend the moratorium by 2 years. Developed nation says that do not extend it by 2 years, just remove this moratorium forever and keep the norm that no custom duty will be imposed. As developed nations are the major exporter of these goods, they will benefit the most. On the other hand, the developing countries like India will face hurdles in promoting its own e-commerce transactions across the global platform. Now, these are the for and against arguments that yes, permanent moratorium should be provided as suggested by the developed nation. On the other hand, we have that no permanent moratorium should be provided as India has argued. Now we have arguments on both the sides. Let's discuss them one by one. There is low share of digitized goods in the overall trade. So digitized goods only amounts to 1% of overall merchandise trade in the world. So if we remove the moratorium, it is not going to impact the global economy as such. Secondly, it will promote the growth of other sectors. So once we know that there is no custom duty imposed on the export and imports of e-commerce, other sectors which are relying on these e-commerce websites or transactions will focus more towards their business growth. So whether the advertisement which are coming on these sites or the other areas which are working as a subsidiaries to the e-commerce will benefit a lot. The next argument is that if the government goes for imposing the custom duty on e-commerce, it will adversely impact the consumer choices and their demand with respect to the international products of high quality. Then we have the issue of administrative challenges. So, the international transactions of e-commerce are very hard to identify. It is very hard to identify who has ordered, when, where and how. And given the millions of transactions, it is hard for the administrative agencies
the tax collecting authorities to get exact value of transaction in their collection. The last one is the pluralative approach. Pluralative approach simply means that developed countries are now focusing more towards plurilateralism. It simply means that they are focusing on those arguments where the plural or the majority of the WTO members are agreeing. It simply means that if there are 100 WTO members and 10 says no to an issue, 9 says yes to an issue, it simply means that plural or the 10 members should get the majority. But these 10 members does not show the exact majority of the world trade members. To gain the majority, at least 50% plus members should agree on a particular topic. So, developed nations are now promoting the plurilateralism where small majority try to win the argument. Now coming to the no or the against points of moratorium. Now, India says that yes, custom duties in the near future should be imposed on e-commerce. Let us see why. The first one is the revenue loss. South Africa and India has published a separate research paper in which they have argued that there is a loss of $10 billion to the developing nations if they do not impose custom duties. The second argument is that it will have an adverse impact on the developing economy because they will lose 95% of the revenue margin. Now how it is done? See, if 100 goods are transacted between developed and developing countries, out of this 95 comes from developed nations and 5 comes from developing or least developed nations. If least developed countries are imposing duties on these 95, they will definitely gain on the revenue earning. That is the argument which is mentioned in the second point. Then we have rapid technological advancement. Now, given the rapid technological advancement, least developed countries or developing countries are far behind that of the developed nations with respect to the entrepreneurship, penetration of internet and others. The next argument is that it will ensure Atmanirbharta of Bharat. So, indigenization, promotion to the domestic entrepreneurship, Skill India movement, Make in India movement and others will get a boost once there is a custom duty imposed on the imports coming by e-commerce platform. The last one is that India has always supported the rule-based rules of WTO. Rule-based multilateral trading system to function under the WTO regime, instead the plurilateralism supported by the developed nations. This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page 5th and talks about an important phenomenon known by the name urban heat island, which is now being seen to grow rapidly in India's capital city, Delhi. The context says that higher night temperature in Delhi has again pointed towards the rising trend of urban heat island. Now, we have already covered this topic thoroughly in the mains 2021 RAU'S Compass magazine of Environment and Geography. So, if you have that subscription, you can go through the detailed analysis or you can also go through the discussion that we are going through. Now, this topic is extremely important for your General Studies paper 3 under environment topic, and it is also important for your General Studies paper 1 under the geography concepts. Now, the point is, what are urban heat islands, why they are now increasing day by day, and why they are dangerous. So, is it dangerous to have urban heat island? The answer would be yes. First, presence of such heat island increases the blood circulation in human body as well as other bodily functions, especially in people who are of elder age. It also increases and makes the houses in which we are habitating as a heat trapper. So heat enters the house inside, but instead of escaping at the night, the heat remains inside the house, which causes the dehydration problems and even at the extreme level, the cardiac attacks. And lastly, the heat strokes now have become common even in the evening situation. Now the question is, why heat islands are rising in India? The first reason is the rising illegal encroachment on land
So as we have seen that the urbanization is on the ever rising increase now, more than 400 million people are now residing in the urban centers. Then comes the falling tree cover in the urban areas. So deforestation is the another reason. Then we have concretization of the urban landscape. So there are no porous roads. So there is less soil available, which can control the pressure of high temperature. We are constructing more and more asphalt roads which are black in color and absorb more heat. Climate change is of course the top reason for all of these. Then we have heat trapping buildings. So green buildings are less in terms of percentage. Then we have compact designs of households. Then we have small streets, compact buildings, and lastly the artificial cooling coming from refrigerators, air conditioners, and even the vehicular pollution that traps heat are making the urban centers to be the heat islands. Now let us see what heat island is all about. Heat island simply means it is a pocket within the city. Now please remember, heat islands are only in the city areas. These are the small pockets which are warmer than the surrounding areas due to loss of green cover, concretization, increasing the cooling equipments, and even the vehicular pollution. Now take this example which was also given and is based on the research of the IIT Delhi, and this was also highlighted in the article. Now as you can see in the first diagram, we have unplanned urbanization and the changing land use land cover, which also known by the term LULC. In red shaded area, we have small heat island of 1972 in Delhi. Gradually, between 1981 till 2014, these heat islands or the areas which have shown the higher heat temperature even in the evening and the night are on the rise. This simply means that even around the areas of Delhi which are much colder to Delhi, we have now small heat islands. So take this example, let's say this is an urban area, and in this urban area, some colonies, some localities are more heat producing or are more warmer. So these would be the urban heat islands. The area surrounding these islands are much cooler and they are not part of this island. If we go through the spatial explanation, so first we see the wave of urbanization. Then there is changing land use pattern because we are now habitating more people to live in a particular area. For that we are changing the land use pattern. So we are covering the forest with the concretization. So we have less tree cover. Apart from that, we are using the coolants, refrigerants, ACs, vehicular pollution, which also increases the heat and reduces the cooling capacity of the natural ecosystem. That is the reason why these three has increased the waste heat generated. Both these things, that is the less tree cover and the more heat generated, has now led to the low evapotranspiration by the natural ecosystem. That is the reason why we have now seen that there is a generation of heat bubbles in the center of the surrounding cool rural areas. So we have small rural areas which are much colder, and then in the central part we have urban areas which are much hotter and warmer. And these urban areas are now generating the heat islands. As per the International Panel for Climate Change 6th report, urban areas are now becoming more warmer than their surrounding rural areas because of the urban heat island effect. And urbanization, coupled with whatever was already happening across the globe, has now increased and coupled the effect of global warming in the cities. If we go through the important explanation, now you can see it through this diagram that the areas on the right side and areas on the left side are showing less temperature. Why? Because these are the rural areas or suburban residential areas where the green cover is very large. So they have evapotranspiration, they have large albedo also. On the other hand, the central town, they have asphalt road which retains the heat. They have dark rooftops, they have lack of trees, they have heat trapping buildings, they have waste heat from the factories, buildings, vehicles and others, and they have impermeable surface which reduces the surface moisture coming up. So all these reasons And this diagram clearly proves that the central part is forming the higher temperature. So this central part will become the urban heat island. Now, how we can resolve this problem? The first one is we need cooler rooftops. We need shading trees. We need cooler pavements, vegetation. Both these things will together reduce the condition of utilization of air conditioning. Indirectly, they will also reduce the outdoor temperature. Together, these effects will reduce the demand for power plant. Area will emit low greenhouse gases. There will be slow reaction rate in terms of environmental gases. And lastly, we'll have less energy consumption. We will have lower CO2, nitrogen oxides and VOC levels or volatile organic compound level, and we will have the lower ozone layer. All these three becomes lower simply increases the more absorption of heat and lesser chances for creating of heat islands. With this discussion in place, now I will leave you with this question to practice. So read this question carefully and try to answer in the comment box. Let us now move to the next article for the day. This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page 8, that is the editorial page, and talks about the injustice conducted on certain people with respect to the razing of their houses. Now, the article has certain elements which are of political nature, which is not going to be part for today's discussion. So, what we are going to look into is the constitutional provisions behind such injustice act, the legal perspective, what are the international examples for that, and how this example could be taken up by the UPSC in terms of ethical standards or even as a case study in your ethics paper. The writer, that is Madan Lokur, has highlighted important observations with respect to the recent razing of houses of people who were allegedly involved in the riots. According to the article, in the backdrop of razing of the houses in Prayagraj, Uttar Pradesh, the author, who is the former Justice of Supreme Court, Madan B. Lokur. Madan B. Lokur is also known for a Lokur Commission, which was constituted by the government of West Bengal for the allegation and inquiry into the Pegasus surveillance case. So, this person has highlighted some observation, and he has highlighted all 4 observations based on what are the rights and duties of a person in India with respect to the violence. Now, the first question which the author has highlighted is that who is the greater sinner? The one who tempts or incites, or the one who is incited or tempted? It simply means that if we go into the logic and reasoning of who is the actual perpetrator, then the judiciary and the administration should ask itself that whether they should punish the one who has incited or the one who got incited. The law of sedition, as per the Supreme Court, has made it clear that the one who is inciting the violence is also a guilty person. So this is an important observation which was not taken as a consideration according to the author. Now, the second question which author has asked, that is there any constitutional right to resort to violence during a protest? The answer would be no. There is no right to protest in a violent manner. Constitution of India permits only a peaceful assembly without arms. And this is given in your Article 19 of the Fundamental Rights. So yes, peaceful assembly is a fundamental right. Stones, brickbats are absolutely prohibited. However, such kind of names or terms are not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. In the case of farmer protest, right to protest is a fundamental right, was upheld by the Supreme Court. Same under Article 19 and under Article 21. However, at the same time, Supreme Court has forced that this protest should be under the public order and law. Police cannot, according to the Supreme Court judgment, use the violent means to end or disturb the non-violent protest at all. So what we have learned so far? According to the author, if a person is involved directly in the protest in a violent means, So the houses which were razed, the family members of the protesters or the violators have to suffer, have to bear the burden of executive action. So a son or a family member was involved in a violent protest, but the breaking down of the house by the bulldozer actually punished the entire family. The another observation made by the author says that is there a right to shelter a fundamental right in India or not? So let's observe. Under Article 19(1)(e), which states that all citizens in India have a right to reside, yes, residence, and settle in any part of India except if you go through the Article 19(5), area which are inhabited by scheduled tribes or any area where government can give a notification to. So we cannot go into the nuclear power station, we cannot reside inside a secured buildings, we cannot reside inside the cantonment area. So there are certain restrictions, otherwise a person can reside or settle in any part of the country, according to which it is a fundamental right. The second observation is made under the Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which says that everyone has a right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. So people whose houses were razed have these rights and they enjoy them as a fundamental right. So without the due course of law, their houses should not be razed. They should have been given the chance to speak on their behalf. उत्तर प्रदेश आवास एवं विकास परिषद वर्सेस फ्रेंड्स कोऑपरेटिव सोसाइटी 1996 case. Supreme Court observed that right of residence is part of Article 19(1)(e) and right to life and personal liberty are also supporting the right to residence. The last observation made by the author says that which legal and constitutional principle were violated while razing the dwelling of these persons. The action which was not just and fair and reasonable. Now these are the three important words which you can use in your General Studies paper 2 Polity, Governance as well as General Studies paper 4 Ethics. The people whose houses were razed by the administration were not given the adequate opportunity to present their own case. Hence, rule of law was violated. Now here I would like to put a star to all the aspirants. Rule of law is an important argument that you can make in your mains as well as your interview stage to substantiate your arguments. Now as the Supreme Court judge, who is also the author, has highlighted in this article, let us look into the details of rule and law and see whether rule of law was violated or not. Now, rule of law simply means that the absolute power or the supremacy in any country is under the law. So, law is above everything. And if anything is conducted against the law, it will be arbitrary power and will follow the arbitrariness only. So, if a rule of law is violated, as we have seen over here in the fourth observation of the author, that yes, rule of law was violated. In this case, it simply shows that there was arbitrary action on the part of executive. Now, what rule of law has to say? Rule of law says that there should be a procedural aspect to every inquiry. There should be a procedural aspect to every action taken by the government. The first one is that there should be independent and impartial court to settle the important disputes and not the executive action. The second one is that there should be a right to representation by the council, which was not given to the people whose houses were razed. And third, there should always be the supremacy of the law and not the executive structure. This is also an important aspect of a constitutional democracy like India. And it is also highlighted by the Supreme Court under Doctrine of Basic Structure, which initiated since Keshwanand Bharti case 1973. According to A.V. Dicey, the theory of rule of law simply has three important elements. The first one is that law is supreme and there is supremacy of only law. There is no one who is above law. The second one is everyone is equal before the law. So if a person who is rich has violated the law, why don't the administration razed his or her house. There should be equality before law. And third, that there should be a predominance of legal spirit. Entire administration should follow the legal spirit in order to go through the important aspect in such violation of law. With this discussion in place, now we will come to the question of the day. The answer to yesterday's question of the day was option A, that is, Press Council of India is a statutory body but it is not chaired by the broadcasting minister. The question for today is that if a man is unemployed due to unavailability of work in which he was skilled. So please understand this carefully. So there was a person and he was skilled in a particular action or in a particular work. But when he went to the market to get the employment, his skill level was not matching with the skill level in the market. So which of the following unemployment would be the basic reason? Your option first is educated unemployment, frictional unemployment, seasonal unemployment, or the structural unemployment. So identify the correct answer and do comment in the comment box. With this discussion in place, we now come to the end of today's Daily News Simplify. Thank you.